Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about my 3.21 League starter for Crucible League, which is going to be a Toxic Rain Ballista Pathfinder. When we started League Star testing around about a month ago, I was going champion on this build, and it was incredible. I was really hyped. We cleared everything up to Feared on a Quill Rain, and I was really just hoping that nothing gets nerfed and I would be basically smooth sailing. But what happened instead is we got an even better Ascendancy, arguably, which is Pathfinder. With the help of the new Master Surgeon Notable, we can actually get enduring life flasks, so to speak, and with a lot of life recovery from flasks from the passive tree and other effects, we can push this to get round about 2,000 to up to 4,000 or 5,000 life regen per second. We also have an awesome new unique from last league that kind of went under the radar called Wilma's Requital, which really pushes us into this Ballista playstyle, and I'm absolutely loving it so far. Basically, this item makes it so cast speed also applies to attack speed, and you can double dip with certain mechanics. More on that later. Yeah, if you're looking for a comfy, detailed, all-rounder League starter, don't look any further. Let's get into it. So in order to go a little bit more into detail, I will actually split these videos in a few sections so that people who need help with leveling or need help with endgame can look those up, and people who just need the normal build guide don't have to watch all these videos. This is the full build guide. I will push out a full leveling guide where basically we go from 0 all the way through the campaign. Then I'll push out an endgame guide with a little bit more expensive gear, up to like 50 or 100 divines even, for people who want to push the build further. There's a lot of cool tech for endgame builds that I can't really put into this video because the uniques might be too expensive, so we're gonna leave that for its own dedicated video. And then I'm going to ask on stream over on twitch.tv/Palsteron. I'm going to ask people if they have any further questions that aren't answered so they can have a cozy league start. We're going to do a Q&A, and I'm also going to put that on YouTube. Also, I will league start this build myself, so if you want to hang out or follow along or just have like-minded people to talk to, definitely check me out and follow. All right, so first up, let's talk about the Toxic Rain mechanics. Toxic Rain is a projectile AoE duration chaos skill, and it kind of looks like this. You fire into the air, and then it rains down as these chaos damage over time pods. These pods both do chaos damage as well as slow enemies. Important to know about Toxic Rain is that it doesn't scale like a normal bow skill with like weapon damage. It actually scales with gem levels. So in a way, it is kind of similar to a spell. It also scales with stuff like increased damage over time, increased damage over time multiplier, all the good stuff. However, easy mistake to make, this is not a poison build. Just because it's chaos dot doesn't mean that it's poison. Poison is one of many chaos dots, but not every chaos dot is poison, so we're not taking any poison support. What it does scale with, however, is skill effect duration. As you can see here, as long as these pods are on the ground, they will be dealing damage. So the more you can fire before they run out, the more you can overlap them. And that makes stuff like this skill effect duration cluster right here, including the more skill effect duration, also potency of will, as well as the malevolence aura right here, extremely premium. It is basically a multiplier to your damage. Important to know as well is in terms of how many additional arrows do you want and how much increased AoE you want. So right now the consensus is you want exactly 39% increased area of effect for the most efficient overlaps, but no additional arrows. If you get additional arrows, you actually do not overlap more. They get added on the outskirts, so you're not going to do extra damage. It's going to be mildly increased AoE, but it can actually screw up how these pods are aligned. It is very complicated. There's no need to get into it. However, 39% AoE, no additional arrows. We achieve 39% increased AoE by taking the 20% increased AoE bow mastery. Then we have 10 extra from the Toxic Rain quality right here. And then we also get 9% from a craft on our amulet. But this is not a breakpoint. Don't go over it, just exactly 39% if you can. Since we now know that additional arrows do not add single target damage, it also means no rain of splinters and no additional arrows from the passive tree. I know that there is a new cluster here, but you really don't want it. It doesn't add anything for you. Neither does Master Fletcher. You could say that's a downside, but in reality, if you're looking here, that is a ton of points that we would have to allocate. So that's actually not that big of a deal. Another important thing is slows are highly encouraged on a Toxic Rain build because of damage uptime. The way you can think about this is there's going to be a lot of moving enemies. Not every boss is going to be stationary, right? For example, invitations. So the longer you can keep them in this circle and damaging them, the better. Now, Toxic Rain already has a in-build slow, so that is nice, but we can stack more on top. From the Eldritch Implicit, we get another 15% chance to maim on hit, which reduces their movement speed even further. And then we also have Ensnaring Arrow right here, which we cast ourselves. We have it on our Mirage Archer, so it kind of gets automated, right? For like 8-9 seconds, it's just shooting over your head. And it also applies stuff like Culling Strike or Blind. Because if you have too low accuracy, then Nature's Reprisal, you're not going to apply the Wither. The Wither is still applied with the attack. However, I'm not really investing into accuracy whatsoever, and I'm still at like 87% hit chance. Just make sure you're not on like 60-70%. All right, next up, let's talk about why Ballistas. So first up, going self-cast and not really bothering with Ballistas is totally fine. There's a lot of builds out there. I will just outline here why I personally chose this. By no stretch do I want to impose anybody that they have to go Ballistas. Toxic Rain is a really strong skill, so it can carry you even if you don't go Ballistas. The first reason why I love it is it's just a very comfy playstyle and I don't have to aim. As somebody with a lot of long gaming sessions, my wrists are pretty holy to me. It doesn't stop there though, it also has damage implications though, because totems aim perfectly. They will aim on top of the enemy. They basically are a program, so you don't have any human arrows when placing down your pods. You really want to aim on top of the enemy, and the Ballistas will do a way better job, especially while you're kiting around and you have to do stuff like this against harder bosses, right? You can't always just stand still and cast. Also, totems add an extra scaling vector. What do I mean by that? On a normal build, you can have 3 Ballista totems. Just with the Ballista support right here, right, adds 2 additional totems. However, once you go totems, you can also go Watchtowers, which gives another +1. Panopticon, which gives +1, so we're at 5 totems now. And then also Wilma's Requital grants you Ancestral Bond, so you're up to 6. A lot of people say they don't like how much damage Toxic Rain deals. This is a very good way to circumvent that. The last reason we just talked about here, that's a big one, is we get to use the new unique Wilma's Requital. So this unique is absolutely incredible for a few reasons. First up, it gives us Ancestral Bond, which is +1 additional totems, with the downside of us not being able to deal damage ourselves. Once you spec a lot into Ballistas, your own damage will be so irrelevant that this is basically not much of a downside. So yeah, you go from 5 to 6 totems, which is straight up 20% more damage. But then the big one here is increases and reductions to cast speed apply to attack speed. Why is this so interesting? Well, it actually double dips on certain effects. Notice like frenzy charges that say attack and cast speed. Well, it counts double if you have a Wilma's on. So for example, we have 4 frenzy charges times 4. That is normally 16% attack speed. For us, it's doubled because also the cast speed counts. The same is true for Onslaught. And that is pretty significant because Onslaught doesn't just give us 20% attack and cast speed, which double dips, so 40%. It's actually more because we're going to run the Silver Flask that gets skilled by Pathfinder Flask effect. So it's going to be around about 60 to 70% actually. This also works on Haste, which we're using. It works on Vol Haste, and it also works on stuff like Time Clasp, the unique ring that we talked about earlier. It's right here. And on the passive tree, before you have your cluster set up, you're also going to be taking coordination. Now, not only is Wilma's a huge damage increase, it is attack speed increase, right? That means it's also going to feel infinitely better. Your totems are going to be more responsive. And on top of that, until you get your +3 bow, you're going to have Quill Rain, which has 3 attack speed per second base. You just have a Gatling gun, basically. Another big thing that we have is damage uptime. If you think about really hard bosses, you sometimes have to dodge mechanics. So if you have a self-cast build, you will have to sometimes just move, and while you're moving, you're not dealing any damage. Well, enter Ballistas. All you do is you put them down, and then you can move around as much as you want. The only important thing is that you don't neglect the defense of your Ballistas completely, so you don't have to replace them all the time. That's why we take Ironwood here. And at the end here, you also get to debuff enemies. Now you don't have to fire anymore for damage, so you can still do stuff while your Ballistas do stuff, right? And that comes in the form of Frenzy support, which basically gives you free Frenzy charges. Now, you might say Blood Rage, but it's like, it's only on kill, right? It doesn't do anything against bosses, so that is a problem. Against bosses, you're actually going to get straight up 16% more damage. And once again, the attack speed double dips with Wilma's. As well as that, we can also debuff the enemy with Ensnaring Arrow. We can put stuff like Culling Strike on here, which is huge, and also Blind support, and Ensnaring Arrow will slow the enemies even further. And you don't really need to press this. You press it once every 8 seconds or so. The rest is going to be done through your Mirage Archer, because it has a 4-second duration, but we have a ton of increased skill effect duration, which doesn't just count for Toxic Rain, it's global. All right, next up, let's talk about Life Flasks and Petrified Blood. This is basically explaining why Pathfinder is so incredible on this build. The biggest thing here is Master Surgeon. So Master Surgeon has the downside that your life recovery from Flask is 50% less, which sounds pretty rough, right? But let's read what it actually does. Life Flask effects are not removed when unreserved life is filled. It sounds complicated, but all it means is basically, you know how your life flask is usually not that reliable because you actually have to react to stuff, you have to press it. It's not always up like your life regen or maybe your leech. Well, that is mainly because once you reach full life, your life flask just turns itself off. So you take a hit, right? You flask back up in like half a second, but your life flask turns off immediately because you're now in full life. That is not a thing anymore with this node. What this node basically does is it basically converts a life flask to give you an actual insane life regen aura. And life flasks heal for quite a bit. They actually got buffed, I think 1 or 2 patches ago. One thing you can also do, and which we do, is you can make that even more pronounced with stuff like flask effect duration. If you want to know more about that stuff, I actually made a video a few days ago outlining everything in detail. I'll link it down in the description. But all you have to know is basically you get a lot of increased life flask recovery from your passive tree, and that is going to basically multiplicate how much life regen you get. As an example here, I have the Saturated Divine Flask, which gives me 17,988 over 8.22 seconds. And if you're asking, yes, the less life recovery is already taken into account. So if we do the math, 17,988 divided by 8.28, that means per second we're regenerating 2,172 life, and that is basically just a passive tree, no other gear. Once you take something into account, like for example a Watcher's Eye, right? Now we're looking at 22,696. Or if you take something like a Blood Grip and you want to get even tankier, Blood Grip gives you another 100% life recovery from flasks. Now we're talking at 29,723. And that is like, you can scale this a lot more, but I'm just saying it is pretty insane. Now, you do want the saturated mod on your flask. It gives you 70% increased amount recovered. The reduced recovery rate doesn't really matter. It just means that it's spread out more. I personally prefer the Divine Life Flask because it goes for longer. I only have to press every 8 seconds. But if you want something like if you want something that has a ton more regen, you can actually go for an Eternal Life Flask. If you see here, Eternal Life Flask is 4.78 seconds, but it has a lot more regen per second. Here we're talking like 4 to potentially 8,000 regen. Now, how does Petrified Blood fit into all of this? That's pretty complicated to explain it completely. As I said, you can watch the video if you want to, but basically it gives you a ton of damage reduction. When taking damage from hits, 40% of life loss below half-life is prevented, and then you get that as a degen over time. So basically, if something hits you for 100 damage, 40 of that damage is going to be dealt to you over time. So basically, your regen can kick in, and it's basically like a less damage taken, which is incredible against one-shots. Now, the downside of Petrified Blood is you have to be on low life. However, that is not a problem here. We can still be on full life, because what it says is, life recovery other than flasks cannot recover life to above low life. So whereas usually, right, with Petrified Blood, your leech, your regen, nothing does anything once you're over half life, right? But since our regen is technically from a life flask, it still counts, so we can be on full HP and still take advantage of Petrified Blood. And just because I get this question a lot, no, you do not have to be on low life for Petrified Blood to kick in if you get one-shots. So for example, if an enemy hit you for 100%, right? This area down here, below the half-life threshold, still is taken into account. So if you take 100% of your damage, you're still not going to die because everything that would get you below half-life is still reduced. And this is just extremely needed for this build because one of the downsides over Champion is you have less max hit. You're less good against one-shots because your regen doesn't save you from one-shots. So having something like Petrified Blood work with the new Master Surgeon is just incredible. All right, so I'll quickly show you how this build actually plays so you can see a map. I chose a Guardian here because I can kind of show you the mapping and like a decently sized boss at the same time. So the way this build works is while mapping, your playstyle is basically Quicksilver, place down totems, and just phase through them, right? We do a phasing flask right here. That is very important for your playstyle because you don't want to wait until enemies die. That is where totem builds get slow, right? You actually want to be fast. I'm right now on a champion. I have the same constraints as everybody. Unfortunately, I can't try the new Pathfinder. And the new Pathfinder is so different to the old one that there was really no reason to level it up. There's a few things that are going to change. For example, on the Pathfinder, I don't need my Caustic Arrow setup at all because I already get free Wither, which is awesome. Then I get to use Ensnaring Arrow, which I can't in the showcase. Molten Shell right here is going to be replaced by probably Mortal Call. I still have to look into that. Probably Mortal Call. Now, against bosses, you put down your Despair. I don't think you're going to need this. Maybe against like an Essence or a Metamorph, but usually not while mapping. What is really cool while mapping, though, is Frenzy. You just press it like 2 to 3 times here or there. Your maximum frenzies are 4. So if you can stay at that, that's 16% more damage and 32% increased attack speed. Really cool. Whenever Val Haste is up, definitely press it. Gives you even more attack and movement speed. And then for movement skill, you can either go Flame Dash or Blink Arrow. I personally like the responsiveness of Flame Dash more against bosses, but for maps, Blink Arrow is usually better, but I'll just show you like this. Our map mods here, I think, are pretty tame. I guess there's some increased damage here. There's actually quite a bit of increased damage. Let's see what happens. All right, overall, let's just zoom through. So as I said, it's important that you have your Quartz Flask on because that is your thing. So you want to press your Mirage Archer every 8 or so seconds. On the Pathfinder, I'll do a lot more damage because everything basically will wither, not just my Mirage Archer. So everything's just going to melt a lot faster. However, in this showcase, I basically have that. I'm also missing the 3000 life regen, but whatever. I'm just showing you basically the playstyle right here. I wish there was like an alpha or something. That would be pretty cool, but what can you do? So one important thing about playing Ballista skills, you have to trust that stuff behind you dies. If I go behind here, everywhere where I was, stuff died, right? And that is because, okay, these guys just popped up. And that is because Ballistas are a little bit delayed, obviously. But you don't want to just stand there. You don't want to be this guy, right? You don't want to do this and then wait and like do this. That's why you have phasing and why we're tanky, right? That's why you want to be tanky on a Ballista build, so you can do exactly what I'm doing right here and just phase through enemies like it's nothing, right? So on the Pathfinder, I actually don't need the Quartz Flask. We'll have the phasing from the passive tree, which is a lot more cozy, but right now it is very nice to have. Now at the boss, so you can see here I'm a little bit lazy. I'm not really pressing my Frenzy, which gives me a ton extra damage. As you can see right here, the Ballistas are just firing away like it's nothing. And that is mainly because I'm right now running Quill Rain, which is still my leveling bow. I bought this one for a few chaos at level 5. And with this setup, we did everything up to Feared. It was actually pretty darn easy. And I can't imagine it getting harder on Pathfinder. Now, against the boss, what you have to remember is put down your Despair. We don't have much chaos resistance reduction, so that Despair is actually really important. You don't want to automate it on a ring because the ring has less Despair level. So yeah, you definitely want to self-cast it. If you can, obviously, Val Haste, press it at the bosses, have your Frenzy up, and then apply your Ensnaring Arrow, or in my case now, the Caustic Arrow. So Minotaur is gonna like jump around, which you're gonna see like one of the downsides of Toxic Rain, which is sometimes they're just going to be jumping around. So I'm gonna set this up, he's gonna jump over there, and I'm gonna do this, right? So what's going to happen right now is the enemy's just going to get degen, but he's moving around, so I'm kind of screwed. So they have to reapply again, right? So against stationary enemies, the damage stacking is pretty damn crazy. As you can see here, we just kind of tanked this slam completely. The higher your investment goes, the higher also will your damage go. Also, you saw the call right here. If you don't care about defenses as much as I do, you will see probably double the damage you see right here. But I really like this comfy playstyle. It also helps a lot if you're more defensive. It helps a lot with levels because then you level up faster. You get your passive points faster and you can still gain power through the passive tree. All right, so let's talk defenses. Now, depending on gear, you're going to have around about 2,000 to 5,000 regen per second. So that's going to be around about in percentages 40 to maybe even over 100 of your life regenerated per second. And you also have Petrified Blood, but you do not have to be even low life. If you want to know more about that, I explained it in the earlier section. And then we actually opt, instead of armor, into 70% of physical taken as elemental. Now, why do we do that? It's mostly because the armor and evasion masteries kind of got nerfed. You don't have the reservation efficiency anymore, and we cannot take all these points to get mana reservation. We're already on a small cluster jewel, so it is kind of rough. So what we're doing instead here is we're foregoing determination for physical damage reduction. Now, we do that by running first off Lightning Coil, which gives you 50% of damage taken as lightning, and then also Taste of Hate, which gives you 15%, but that also gets scaled with Flask Effect from Pathfinder. If you want to know what that means, 70% physical damage taken as Ellie. The reason it's so good is because it gets reduced by resistances, right? So your physical damage then basically runs against resistances. So it takes 70 times 0.75. And we see that we have 52% physical damage reduction. Now, sometimes it looks like armor is actually better, but the deal is the higher a hit goes, the less effective armor gets. So while it might show 70-80% physical damage reduction on your POB, POB only calculates an enemy physical hit of 2,320. Put that up to 6,000, 7,000, which is hits that could actually one-shot you, and you'll see why stuff like this is so strong. This is always 52% no matter how big the hit. Now then, the Ballista playstyle in general is just extremely, extremely defensive, right? So this is a ranged skill. We can just put the Ballista right here, and it's going to fire all the way over there. What the hell is happening with my FPS? It's going to fire all the way over here, right? You don't have to do anything. You can kite around. You can dodge enemy attacks while your Ballistas do all the work. This is especially good for new players, but also for people who are not that experienced with bosses. You have insane slows with a Toxic Rain itself slowing. We have on top of that stacking Ensnaring Arrow and Maim from the gloves. We have the basically at this point mandatory 100% spell suppression, which is going to half the damage you take from spells. We have 67% evade chance. And then for ailment immune, we actually use extinguish, which is actually a really underrated glove implicit chance to extinguish enemies on hit. Now, what this means is enemies that are extinguished cannot inflict elemental ailments. So basically, you're kind of ailment immune. However, against freeze, that is not enough for me personally. Sometimes enemies, like, I don't know, off-screen you with like a cold effect. You never want to be frozen, basically. All the other ailments is like, if it happens once in 100 times, it's fine. But freeze, it's not fine. So you either get it from the boots. I don't have it here, but on a higher investment, you will have cannot be frozen. And until then, you're going to use the Soul of the Brine King for 100% chance to avoid being frozen. And then you can also use Hardened Scars. Now, what is Hardened Scars? That is an anoint only notable right here. 15% increased life recovery from flasks, really good with Pathfinder, and 25% less damage over time taken during the effect of a life flask, which we always have, right? So this is good. Like 25% less damage over time is, it sounds huge, but the thing is we have so much regen that I don't think damage over time is going to do much for us. I personally opt in my endgame version to go for Potency of Will for even more skill effect duration. It's like 12% more damage or something, but if you want to go even more defensive, you can definitely take this. As for Pantheons, real quick, until you have freeze immune from your boots, you definitely want to be Soul of the Brine King. Afterwards, you can play around with what you want. I'm not even sure myself. I usually go for Soul of Arakali, but we have so much damage over time production already through our life regen that it might just be Soul of Lunaris or Soul of Solaris. As for small, you can go Soul of Roslathite. It works very well with our life flask sustain, but we already kind of have that, so it's not necessary. Play around with it. What I really love in general is Soul of Aberath. It's really good on stuff like Red Altars. The less ignite duration is kind of cute, but it's mostly about the unaffected by Burning Ground. Also, endgame, we just have to talk about Progenesis. Progenesis is just one of these flasks that is really self-explanatory. It is incredibly strong. I'm going to talk about it more in the endgame section, but once you have Progenesis, you will be nigh unkillable. Now then, let's talk about Ascendancy. For me personally, there is two Ascendancies that I would recommend. The number one is the one we're playing, which is Pathfinder, and then there's also Second Lead Champion. I already made a video about this. It is very, very tanky. However, it does lack recovery, which is quite noticeable, which is also why I'm so hyped about Pathfinder actually providing that. That was always one of the biggest things with Toxic Rain. Now let's talk about the new Pathfinder rework. I already talked about Master Surgeon in the intro. I explained to you why this is so good. The TLDR is, even without much investment, you'll get like 2,000 life regeneration from your life flask. That can go way, way, way higher if you want to scale it even further. This fixes a huge problem that Toxic Rain and Ballista builds usually have, so it's just a perfect fit. To get there, you're going to take Nature's Adrenaline. Fast charges gain free charges every 3 seconds. It helps a lot with actually sustaining, especially your utility flasks. Then we have a huge rework, which is Nature's Reprisal. Now, a lot of people are annoyed by the removal of the AoE, and it's semi-annoying, but for us, we need exactly 39% AoE. It's not that big of a deal because it's just 1 point here for the 20%. 10% you get from the gem anyways, and then you just have to either get the 9% from the amulet or from the gloves. But the wither here that you get is just absolutely fantastic. This means that you don't have to use Withering Touch, which is basically a dead support. It will cost me a support skill. Super annoying. This way it's always up on my main skill. even while mapping, all the rares are going to have 15 stacks. I don't want to put down like a spell totem or something. That is just pretty damn annoying. They also die all the time, right? And it also has 50% increased effect of Wither, which on this build is straight up 24% more damage. And as our last point, we have Nature's Boon. Now, don't underestimate this node because we are scaling stuff like Silver Flask, Quicksilver Flask. Now, the Granite Flask is later going to be replaced by a Taste of Hate, which does not get scaled, but we also have the Jade Flask. So in total, this is actually quite a bit of movement speed. For example, if you're more into like racing, then you probably want to take Nature's Boon early. We take it as our last Ascendancy, mainly because I want the damage early, and then I want to get to Master Surgeon before I get to maps, and that is only possible this way, and taking Nature's Boon last. Now, other than Pathfinder and Champion, which I both think are very strong, what other Ascendancy classes could you go for? I would not really recommend Witch and Occultist. I know the pops look nice, right? But it's just way too much travel. You're going to be incredibly squishy. As for Raider, I certainly would not recommend it. Doing my POBs, it kind of felt like a strictly worse Pathfinder. You already get free Frenzy charges from Frenzy. You're already on this side here. You have no problem getting your spell suppression capped. You can just get phasing on kill from these two nodes right here, right? And then the Onslaught, it's pretty easy to get Onslaught from the Silver Flask that we scale here. And even movement speed-wise, it's almost the same as a Pathfinder when you scale a Silver Flask. And then we have Trickster, which is okay-ish. I haven't tested it myself. You still get good recovery, although this recovery is not up during boss fights. Personally, I can't recommend it, but if you really need to play Shadow because you want to respec into an assassin later or a saboteur, then knock yourself out, but it will have to be a little bit more experimental. All right, next up for gear, I have to do this in POB, unfortunately, because once again, I can't be Pathfinder, and the gear is a little bit different from Champion. First up, Quill Rain is a no-brainer. It has a ton of attack speed. It has projectile speed, which means the Toxic Rain falls down faster. It just feels incredible. Later, it is going to be replaced by a +3 bow, but don't do that too early. You would be surprised if you can get +2 on your Lightning Coil, which is pretty easy with Tainted Orb of Fusings. You're actually sometimes better off just putting it into your body armor and keeping the Quill Rain. So just make sure that it's actually an upgrade to go +3. Also, be mindful that Quill Rain is a lot more fun to play than a +3 bow. You get a ton of attack speed with Wilma's Requital. Your Ballistas are just going to be firing like crazy. So even if your +3 bow maybe upgrades your damage by like 15% or something, think about whether that's actually worth the playstyle. Then we have a Quiver. The best implicit here would be Totem Placement Speed, but you really don't need it because we're already at all the Ballista clusters. It's just nice and comfy to have. What you want to do here is you actually want to Essence spam damage with bow skills. And you can do this with Essence of Woes. So for example, the Screaming gives 31 to 36 damage with bow skills. And then you roll until you get Dot Multi most likely. Dot Multi is your best hit or life in some combination of resistances or attack speed. As for Helmet, your best in slot is Wilma's Requital. I have no idea how expensive this is going to be. It's not that rare of an item. That completely depends on how many people play this build. So I simply don't know, right? I simply don't know. I can show you the prices this patch. All right, here you go. Starts off 1 Chaos, 1 Chaos, 1 Chaos, 2 Chaos. And it goes up to like 14 Chaos. I think that was when somebody made a video. Might have been me. And it was at around about 10 Chaos. So it's not a very rare item. However, if everybody wants it early, then it's going to be like in a Divine or something. I don't know. It could be even more. I don't know. Like, there could be ninja nerfs to this. They could make it rarer. All you have to know is that until you have Wilma's Requital, you can also be semi-self-cast. You can, like, attack yourself a little bit, put down Ballistas. You can kind of swap it up. Once you're Wilma's Requital, you're locked into Ballistas. You want to know why Wilma's is so good? I explained it in the intro section in the mechanics. Next up, Lightning Coil. Lightning Coil is our defensive chest of choice. Since we won't be fitting Determination in here, we're going to be stacking both Lightning Coil and Taste of Hate. Taste of Hate could be expensive, so until you have a Taste of Hate, you want to go to Granite Flask most likely. As for a Lightning Coil, if you can get a +2 AoE, duration, or projectile, all of those are tags on Toxic Rain. That is going to be very good, and then you make a 6-link with Tainted Orb of Fusings. Now, gloves, all that matters is that you get Spell Suppress, Life, and Evasion. You really want to be Spell Suppress capped no matter what. And for implicits, we have Maim, which is not super important, but it does help with the slow. And then we have Extinguish, so you're ailment immune quasi. As for amulets, there's different things you can do. Obviously, +1 chaos, +1 all skills would be the dream. Maybe with a little bit of chaos done multi on top, a little bit of life. This is what we got on this budget. A +1 with life, and I think this is like tier 5 damage over time multi. What you need to look out for is the 9% increased area of effect. Once again, we need exactly 39% increased AoE for Toxic Rain to perfectly work. As for annoyance, you have two choices. If you want to go more defensive, Hardened Scars. If you want to do more damage, Potency of Will. On our boots, we want to have Avoid to be Frozen. If you don't have that, take it on your Pantheon as soon as you can. As much movement speed, life, and spell suppression as you can. The chance to avoid ailments is actually outdated. You don't need that. And then you want either action speed or movement speed in the implicit on top. As for rings, these are mostly going to fix your resistances and your intelligence and strength. Intelligence and strength is actually quite a problem. Also something that we're going to fix on our belt with a heavy belt plus a strength roll. It's also going to cap our resistances. Now, if you have enough resistances that you don't need a second ring, what you can do is you can go for Time Clasp. This ring is incredibly strong because you get skill effect duration, which is more damage, unaffected by temporal changes, kind of cozy, and then you also get attack and cast speed, which get double dipped with Wilma's Requital. As for the Life Flask, you really want a saturated Divine Life Flask, the suffix, whatever you want, right? You can do Hinder, you can do Poison, whatever you feel like. Shock is probably the best option. I'm probably going to edit Shock. The Divine Life Flask gives you a ton of life regen. I think on this gear with a Watcher's Eye, it's like 2,700, and without a Watcher's Eye, it's like 2,100 per second or something like that. If you have a Divine Life Flask, that means you only have to press every 8 seconds. If you have an Eternal Life Flask, it's gonna mean you have way more regen, but you have to press every 4 seconds, which is quite annoying. A Jade Flask with increased evasion, pretty cookie cutter. A Quicksilver with increased movement speed. Now you really want to look for charge recovery on most of these, so you can actually have 100% uptime on Pathfinder. Taste of Hate could be expensive. I'm not really sure. You want as good of a physical damage from hits taken as cold as possible. It goes up to 15%. Until you have a Taste of Hate, for example, here in the mid-game version, you're going to go for a Granite Flask with increased armor during effect. And at the end here, we have a Silver Flask, which the onslaught from it gets scaled by all the increased flask effect, which then double dips with Wilma's Requital. As a suffix, you can put on attack speed if you want more damage. You can put on reduced effect of curses, stuff like that. We're going to go over the cluster jewels in the passive tree section. As for normal jewels, now you would really like a Watcher's Eye with life recovery from flasks while affected by vitality. This is a huge boon to your region. You can also have malevolence mods like, I don't know, dot multi. Don't forget that once you have this Watcher's Eye, you're going to have to reserve a level 1 vitality. We don't do anything with region. We have way more than enough. Just put a level 1 in there somewhere so that mod actually works. And your normal jewels are going to be your usual chaos damage over time multi, damage over time multi, damage over time. Increased maximum life is quite important, and any sort of increased damage or attack speed. As for gems, these are not completely done yet because I still want to wait for some gem info on Thursday. The POB will be updated by then. But TLDR is your main setup will be Toxic Rain, and it will have to have 20 quality because you want that increased AoE for perfect overlaps. 21 if you can get. One thing you should really do is in your offhand level as many Toxic Rains as possible. Then once you level them, make sure that they're on 20 quality and try to corrupt them into 21. That gives you another 11% more damage or something. Count 6 because we have 6 Ballistas. Efficacy is very strong, more damage over time. Skill effect duration, Ballista support, so we can put it on the Ballista. Void manipulation, just more damage. Now, life tap is something you can maybe replace later, but it is very comfy to not have to worry about mana at all, so would definitely recommend that until you have really good gear. And then Vicious Projectiles at the end here, just another multiplier. Now notice that I have no Empower in here. That would be a ton of damage, but this is a budget version, so we're not going to include it. Obviously, it's incredibly strong, especially if you can get a level 4 later. One thing you can do if you somehow fix your mana, you can put in damage on full life instead of life tap. Since we have so much regen, we're basically always on full life. As for auras, we are using haste. So the Val haste is not enabled. As you can see here, with Val haste, we would have even more damage. But the haste is enabled. We're actually reserving this. It is incredibly good with Wilma's because both the attack speed and the cast speed count, and it also makes us faster. If you want to be more tanky, you should probably go for Grace. Malevolence is a huge damage multiplier, as for most dot builds. Vitality, you only have to have if you have the Watcher's Eye mod, because then you need Vitality, and Petrified Blood is just bonkers. Check where I talk about it in the intro. As for buffs, we're going to be using Frenzy with greater multiple projectiles. Frenzy basically gives you Frenzy charges, and GMP just so you don't have to aim exactly, you just have to kind of aim in that direction. It's just nice to have. Despair, we basically click on bosses. Pretty self-explanatory. And between Steel Skin and Immortal Call, I'm not 100% sure yet. I'll have to think about it. It will be updated in the description. And as well as that, we have a debuff setup with Ensnaring Arrow. You have this on a Mirage Archer setup, so it's also kind of automated. You have it with Culling Strike, Blind, which is very nice, and then also GMP, once again, so your Mirage Archer doesn't miss. As for the passive tree, it is a little bit different than the usual Toxic Rain pathing, because mostly we want to play around Master Surgeon, and we want to get quite a bit of Life Flask effect. Like, for example, here, the Field Medicine is just absolutely amazing with the flask effect duration, with the life recovery from flasks. We also get Profane Chemistry. And to help with the uptime of all our flasks, we also have Natural Remedies down here. Also, definitely take the Mastery here for the 1 charge every 3 seconds on your life flasks. Other than that, this Spell Suppression cluster is also really good because it also synergizes with life flasks. Maybe not something you would usually take, but you definitely want it on here. You want to path to both totem clusters. Now, we do not need totem taunt from the mastery because we have it on a medium cluster, on that in a second. But what you do want is skills that would summon a totem have a 30% chance to summon 2 instead. It's just really nice while mapping. Sometimes it just throws 2 down, so you have double AoE. Here, you get Panopticon plus 1 additional totem, and Watchtowers plus 1 additional totem. These are extremely vital. As for keystones, we only really take Magebane to cap our spell suppression without having to path to Inveterate, which saves us a lot of points. And yeah, you take as much life as you can get. You take stuff like Quick Step to make you faster. As for Masteries, you definitely want the 20% AoE while wielding a bow. This is needed, once again, for the 39% breakpoint. And then you have a Chaos Mastery here that I'm going to try out. With how much regen we're going to have, the +1 level of all Chaos skill gems with the degen might actually work out. Also because we don't get damaged whenever the totems fire, only when we put them down. So in theory, this is just an easy 11% more damage, which is pretty damn huge. As for Reservation, you're going to have to look into that a little bit more. So basically, we have a large cluster here. There's nothing important that you really need. You just want as much increased chaos damage as possible. If you don't have these notables from the get-go, it's not that big of a deal. The one medium cluster that you really want is the one with Shrieking Bolts. Taunt is incredibly strong on totems. If you want this, you're going to want Shrieking Bolts. Until you have that, you can also take the Taunt Mastery on Summon. One thing I will mention, though, is Pathfinder is very tanky, so maybe I don't even want Taunt. Maybe I want to draw the attention to me. I'm not 100% sure. As a second medium, the Repeater would be really strong. And then you also want a small cluster jewel right here, a Reservation Efficiency cluster. This is basically necessary in order to compensate for the nerfs and in order to get haste into the build. Now, you want the Malevolence, has increased mana reservation efficiency or haste. Either works, but this one also has a little bit of Chaos Res on top. Other than that, important, you definitely want this cluster as soon as possible because these 2 small nodes here give you phasing on kill. As for leveling, we'll go over this really quickly because I'll have a full leveling video out if you care. Also, in the POB, there will be acts included, and we'll start from Act 1. Once the leveling video is out, I'll link it down in the description. First act, pretty standard. In Act 2, you're kind of going to progress towards Watchtowers to get your early +1 totem. It's going to be a really cozy playstyle. You basically just place down totem, move, place down totem, move, and you're going to get a lot of free XP. Until you're level 12, you go with Caustic Arrow and Shrapnel Ballista. Once again, more will be explained in the leveling video. But after you're level 12, you're going to go Toxic Rain Self-Cast plus Toxic Rain Ballista. So once you have these Ballistas, you're going to make your way over here to Avatar of the Hunt. On the way, you get the phasing that you so much want, and you also get some movement speed and damage. Then you head straight up down to Onslaught right here. And a very big thing with the new mastery is immune to bleeding if equipped helmet has higher armor than evasion. So if your armor is higher than evasion on your helmet, if you can not forget that, you're going to be bleed immune during the campaign, which is a pretty big deal, especially in Act 4 against those pesky mobs. If you can't remember that, just don't take it. Then we go over to Far Side. In Act 5, we're just finishing up some life here, and after that we go up, and we really want that exceptional performance for the extra damage. Once we have that, we're also going to take the All Res here, and then we're going to work on Profane Chemistry. At this point, we don't do any nasty things with Life Flasks, but it's still really cozy to have while leveling. After this is all done in Act 7, we're going to slowly but surely go up. We're going to grab Charisma, so we have more mana reservation. Then in Act 8, we're going to grab Hunter's Gambit as soon as we can, as well as go up to Wasting right here. You can also take the Revenge of the Hunted earlier if you feel squishy. Act 9 is going to be you want Blood Siphon, gives you extra strength, which is nice, and Entropy also gives you skill effect duration. And then we're going to round that out with Fangs of the Viper, Trickery, as well as Revenge of the Hunted. I also have separate trees down here for progression, but one cool one is After Acts, which is not completely updated. You actually don't need this one. I'll update this one, but basically before you have a cluster jewel, I'll have a passive tree ready. Also check out the note section. Whenever POB is updated, whenever it's finished, we're going to put everything in here about leveling, some tips and tricks in between, maybe some budget uniques to get you stronger. All right, so in conclusion, what do I have to say? This is a fun, strong all-rounder that will get you through everything you have to clear. Once again, we cleared everything up to Feared on 5 to 6 Divines, and it's just probably going to be even cozier on Pathfinder. That being said, though, I simply cannot account for certain unique items and their prices. All I can do is test it as they are right now. So don't at me. I can't do anything about it. Flippers are going to do what they're going to do, and other people are going to buy up the market. Now, this build has incredible regen, perma flask uptime. It's very cozy to play. You phase through enemies. You don't have to target anything. Unless you're bossing, it's basically a one-button build. You have cozy leveling. Poison Concoction did get nerfed, but the good thing is since we're now Ranger, the early Toxic Rain leveling is actually very viable. More on that later. In the leveling video, it can clear T16s on a Crow Rain. We did it on stream over and over. It is incredibly easy to scale your damage. Obviously, once you get into harder content, you're going to need to upgrade your gear because then Toxic Rain might fall off. Otherwise, leveling and endgame guides are out soon. Check the description. Whenever you watch this, it might already be. And also, POB isn't updated yet. I can't do anything about it. I'll put a replacement in there right now, but once it's updated, I'll polish it again. So definitely come back to the video before League Start to get the newest stuff. Also, I often update stuff in between. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I found something cool out in between. But yeah, that's basically all I had to say. Very short video, I'm sure. We're gonna see while I'm editing. Thank you so much to all my Twitch supporters. Thank you to my, in the future, YouTube supporters. At this point, maybe there's already a join button here in case you want to support me a little bit more. Thank you so much for watching. Maybe you could learn a thing or two if you're planning to League Start this. I hope you have a great League Start. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.